There was a woman named Zainab who had spent most of her 28 years believing a lie about herself, a lie that had been whispered to her so many times and in so many ways that it had become the foundation of how she saw herself in the mirror. She believed she was plain, unremarkable, perhaps even unattractive by the standards that society used to measure beauty. And this belief had shaped every aspect of her life. How she dressed to minimize attention, how she avoided photographs, how she dismissed compliments as polite lies, how she had convinced herself that she was unworthy of the kind of love that people wrote songs about. Zainab worked as a librarian at a university, a job she had chosen partly because it allowed her to exist in quiet spaces where appearance mattered less than competence. She wore simple, modest clothing and hijab, kept her head down, and had learned to be invisible in a world that seemed to only see and value those who were beautiful according to narrow, impossible standards. The lie that Zainab believed about herself had started in childhood. She had grown up with two sisters who were considered classically beautiful, tall, slender, with symmetrical features that drew admiring comments wherever they went. Zainab, by contrast, was shorter, had a rounder face, features that didn't fit conventional beauty standards, and a body that was heavier than what magazines and movies told her was acceptable. Throughout her childhood and teenage years, relatives would comment on her sister's beauty while patting Zainab's head and saying she was smart or kind. The consolation prize is given to those not blessed with physical attractiveness. By the time Zainab reached adulthood, she had fully internalized the message. She was the smart one, the kind one, the reliable one, but not the beautiful one. And in a world obsessed with appearance, she believed this made her somehow less worthy, less deserving of romantic love, less likely to be chosen by someone wonderful. What Zainab didn't know, what she couldn't see through the distorted lens of her own self-perception, was that there was someone who saw her completely differently. Someone who had been observing her for months, who had fallen deeply in love with her, and who saw in her something that made all conventional standards of beauty seem shallow and meaningless by comparison. His name was Yusuf, and he was a professor of Islamic studies at the university where Zainab worked. He was 32 years old, had turned down numerous marriage proposals over the years because none of the women had sparked in him what he believed real connection should feel like. He had been teaching at this university for 3 years, and he had noticed Zainab from his very first week there. What Yusuf saw when he looked at Zainab was something that had nothing to do with conventional beauty standards and everything to do with light. There was a radiance about her that he couldn't quite articulate. Something in the way she moved through the library with quiet grace. Something in how she treated every student who asked for help with genuine kindness regardless of how busy she was. Something in her eyes when she would pause to read a page from a book she was shelving, completely absorbed in the words. Yusuf had tried many times to find an appropriate way to get to know Zainab better, but she seemed to actively avoid interaction beyond what was professionally necessary. When he would come to the library to research for his lectures, she would help him find books efficiently and then disappear back to her tasks. When he would see her in the hallway, she would offer a polite greeting but never stop to talk. It was as though she was deliberately making herself invisible. What Yusuf didn't understand was that Zainab had noticed him too, had felt her heart skip when he would enter the library, had found herself thinking about him during quiet moments. But she had immediately dismissed these feelings as foolish. A man like Yusuf, educated, respected, handsome by any objective standard, would never be interested in someone like her. So she had protected herself by creating distance, by not allowing even the possibility of connection that would inevitably lead to rejection and pain. The moment when everything changed came on a quiet afternoon in late autumn. Yusuf had come to the library looking for a specific text on Islamic jurisprudence, and Zainab had helped him locate it in the stacks. As she reached up to pull the book from a high shelf, she lost her balance slightly, and Yusuf instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand gently touching her arm to prevent her from falling. The physical contact, though completely innocent and brief, created a moment of intense awareness between them. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. "I'm sorry," Zainab said quickly, embarrassed, pulling away and handing him the book. "Here's what you were looking for." "Wait," Yusuf said, his voice gentle but firm. "Please, can we talk for a moment? Not here, but perhaps in the reading room, where it's appropriate and visible. I've been wanting to speak with you for a very long time." Zainab felt panic rising. This was exactly what she had been avoiding. "I don't think that's necessary. If you need help finding other books." "It's not about books," Yusuf interrupted. "It's about you. Please, just give me a few minutes of your time." Against her better judgment, against all her instincts telling her to protect herself, Zainab agreed. They sat in the public reading room where other students were studying, maintaining completely appropriate distance and visibility as Islamic principles required. "I need to be honest with you about something," Yusuf began. "I've wanted to speak with you properly for months, but you seem to avoid any interaction beyond what's professionally required. So I'm going to be direct, and I hope you'll forgive me if this is inappropriate. I would like to get to know you better with the intention of marriage. I would like permission to speak with your family and pursue this properly." Zainab stared at him in complete shock, her mind unable to process what she was hearing. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding or cruel joke. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said quietly. "You can't possibly be talking to me. Why would you say that?" Yusuf asked, genuinely confused. "Because look at me," Zainab said, her voice breaking slightly. I'm not the kind of woman someone like you would be interested in. I'm plain, unremarkable. There's nothing about my appearance that would draw your attention. You should be looking at women who are actually beautiful." Yusuf felt his heart breaking as he listened to her describe herself this way. "May I tell you what I see when I look at you?" he asked gently. Zainab nodded, unable to speak. "When I look at you, I see someone who radiates a light that has nothing to do with conventional beauty standards and everything to do with inner beauty that manifests outwardly. I see someone whose face shows kindness in every expression, whose eyes reflect intelligence and depth, whose smile, the rare times I've seen it, illuminates the entire room. I see someone who treats others with dignity, who handles books like they're precious treasures, who makes students feel valued when they ask for help." He continued, his voice filled with sincerity. "Everyone except you knows exactly what's supposedly wrong with your looks according to society's superficial standards. But here's what you need to understand. Everyone except you also knows that you look like an angel. Not the fantasy angels from paintings, but the real ones. The ones whose beauty comes from being close to God, from reflecting His attributes of mercy and kindness and grace." Zainab began to cry. Years of believing the lie about herself crashing against this man's completely different perception of her. "I don't see what you see," she whispered. "When I look in the mirror, I see someone who doesn't measure up to what beauty is supposed to be." "Then you're looking with the wrong eyes," Yusuf said. "You're looking with the eyes of a society that has narrow, meaningless standards that leave out most of humanity. But when I look at you, I see someone created by God exactly as He intended. Someone whose appearance reflects her beautiful soul. Someone who is not just acceptable, but extraordinary precisely because she doesn't fit into conventional molds." He paused, then added, "The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us that God does not look at our outward forms and appearances, but He looks at our hearts and our deeds." When I think about building a life with someone, when I think about marriage and children and growing old together, I want someone whose heart and deeds are beautiful. And when someone has a beautiful heart, it shows in their face, in their eyes, in their entire being. That's what I see when I look at you. Over the following weeks and months, Yusuf pursued proper Islamic courtship with Zainab, involving both families, maintaining appropriate boundaries, getting to know each other through chaperone meetings and family gatherings. And during this time, something remarkable happened to Zainab's self-perception. Through Yusuf's eyes that saw her with love and genuine appreciation, Zainab began to see herself differently. Not because she had changed physically, but because she was finally seeing herself as God saw her, as a creation made with intention and purpose, whose worth had nothing to do with meeting arbitrary beauty standards and everything to do with her character, faith, and essential humanity. When they became engaged, Zainab's family was thrilled, but also somewhat shocked. Her sisters, who had always been considered the beautiful ones, couldn't understand how Zainab had attracted someone like Yusuf when they themselves had struggled to find suitable matches. Their mother, watching all of this unfold, finally said something she should have said decades earlier. "I owe you an apology, Zainab," her mother said one evening. "When you were growing up, we let you believe you weren't beautiful because you didn't look like your sisters. We called you smart and kind as though those were consolation prizes for not being attractive. But that was wrong of us. You've always been beautiful. We just didn't have eyes to see it." Yusuf sees it because he's looking with the eyes of faith, seeing what God sees, valuing what God values. We were looking with the eyes of dunya, of this temporary world and its shallow standards. On their wedding night, after all the celebrations had ended, Zainab sat with her husband and told him something she needed him to understand. "For most of my life, I believed I was unworthy of this kind of love because of how I looked. Your love didn't change how I look, it changed how I see myself. You unlocked something in me that had been closed since childhood. The ability to believe that I could be beautiful, could be desirable, could be chosen by someone wonderful. Thank you for seeing me with different eyes than I see myself, and for teaching me to start seeing myself with those same eyes." Yusuf held his wife's hand and responded with words she would treasure forever. "Everyone except you has always known what's supposedly wrong with your looks according to society's standards. But everyone who truly sees, everyone who looks with eyes of faith and depth, also knows that you look like an angel, like someone created by God with such care and intention that conventional beauty standards become meaningless in comparison. I'm just grateful that God gave me the eyes to see what was always true about you." Years later, They would tell their daughters who inherited their mother's features and their father's eyes, about the importance of seeing beauty in the way God sees it rather than the way society dictates. They would teach them that the person who truly loves you will see you the way Yusuf saw Zainab, not through the lens of superficial standards, but through the lens of soul recognition, of spiritual beauty manifesting physically, of divine creation reflecting divine attributes. The person you love deeply knows exactly what's supposedly wrong with your looks, they would tell their children. They know all the ways you don't meet society's narrow standards. But everyone except you also knows something far more important. You look like an angel, like light made visible, like evidence of God's creative beauty. And when someone sees you that way, when someone recognizes your essential beauty that transcends physical appearance, that's when you know their love is real, deep, and blessed by God. This is the truth. You may believe lies about your appearance, may have internalized years of comments about what's supposedly wrong with your looks. But the person who truly loves you sees something everyone except you can see. You look like an angel, not because you meet conventional beauty standards, but because you don't need to. Your beauty comes from somewhere deeper, from your soul, your character, your faith, your essential humanity created by God with intention and care. When someone sees that beauty, recognize it as a gift and let it teach you to finally see yourself the way God has always seen you. As worthy, as beautiful, as deserving of love exactly as you are.